appreciate everybody being here. My name's John McLaughlin. I used to be John McLaughlin, the TV weather guy. Now I'm John McLaughlin, the corporate pilot and two-way advocate. So really appreciate you being here. I appreciate Cornerstone Bible Fellowship once again allowing us to use their auditorium. When I did the TV weather stuff, my goal was keeping people out of harm's way, keeping people from being killed by severe storms, tornadoes, the derechos, all that. Because if you're dead, you're probably not going to have an opportunity to come to Jesus if you're not going to be a believer by then, right? So that was my goal, and it's very similar in the church security world. We are about safety, keeping people alive on their worst day, and there's none better to inform us on that than Ed Bunk. How the program will work tonight is Ed will speak for about an hour. We'll take a break. The youth group just down the hallway on the left is Meals for Sale, and they're doing that as a fundraiser for their Bible camp, so we want to support that. Take about a 30-minute break, grab bite to eat, and we'll come in and do the final hour, and at the end there'll be questions. So IFC, this is I think the third event we've done with Ed. He came and taught our Educator Academy about a year and a half ago in August, and we put several teachers through our curriculum to kind of see how could teachers benefit by arm training, and we put them through a very rigorous qualification and had about 80% of them passed at a higher level than our law enforcement is required to issue that. So we've demonstrated that yes, we can teach teachers, church people how to perform at a high level on their worst days. And we're continuing these efforts with IFC, not only kind of the educational component like it's going to cover tonight, but working with churches individually, getting high-level people that can come in and speak to congregations, speak to school buildings, talk about where your safety gaps are, how to harden certain areas of your structure, get that concentric rings of protection. So if you have an interest in that at your own house of worship, sign up at the IFC table out at in the foyer there. Let us know you have an interest. We can make sure we mail you if you're not an IFC member. Of course, if you're not an IFC member, please become a member to help support things like this. I guess it was about a year ago, Billy and I and several others with IFC were here, and we went through a trauma medical class. Not everybody that was here at the time was able to purchase individual first aid kit with the tourniquets, chest seals, things like that. So we've resupplied. We have those out at the table, so maybe over the lunch break or afterwards if you didn't get a first aid kit last time. It has all the life-saving stuff, and as Ed will talk about, you're far more likely throughout your course of life to have to put a tourniquet or a chest seal or hemostatic gauze on somebody, then you're probably going to have to get in a gunfight. So that training and awareness is super important as well. So I'm going to bring on Ed in just a second. He is a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel. He's been a history teacher. He has been a law enforcement officer, continues to still reserve officer, or what are you now?
Part-time.
Part-time. So he brings the whole gamut of what we're going to talk about tonight with security. But before we bring him on, if you didn't mind, we'll just say a quick prayer, and then we'll get Ed on the stage. So Heavenly Father, thank you for everybody that's here tonight. Thank you for the work Ed is doing, not just here in Iowa, but as he travels around the country. Most importantly, Lord, we thank you that you put the heart of a protector in the folks that are here tonight, the heart of a warrior, the people that are willing to stand in the gap and stop the bad guy at the door. Lord, thank you for these people. Just pray that you would continue to surround them, surround their own individual houses of worship and schoolrooms and businesses, and protect them on their worst day. Lord, thank you for everybody that's here tonight, and provide travel mercies on the way home. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right, bring up Ed. Welcome Ed Bunk from Last Resort Firearms Training down in good old Arkansas.
Yep.
Thank you much for being here.
Yeah, appreciate the invitation. That's known as welfare applause. You get it before you earn it. So this is impressive. This turnout's impressive. So I thank John and IFC and the church for putting this thing on. So y'all ready? Because we're going to go pretty fast. He already said one break for food, but if you need to answer nature's call, it's down to the left. Just do that all you need to do. I'm going to go real fast to cram as much information as I can in the time you've given me, but don't let that make you think you can't ask questions. You can ask questions during the presentation, during the break, after we're done, or a week from now. I have flyers and cards out there. My last slide will have my info, so if you're welcome to text me, email me, call me, I'll answer your questions. This presentation's R-rated because the topic's R-rated. It's mass murder. That's an R-rated topic, but there will be some violent videos and possibly some adult language in here. This topic makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and I'm actually glad about that. We need to get uncomfortable about this because we don't make changes when we're comfortable with something. And I think I'm going to show you we need drastic changes. That's what I'm going to flow through tonight, but if you leave here and only remember one concept, please remember time and math. Everything about the active shooter problem is time and math. That's it. We get distracted by other things and politics and emotions and all this stuff, but time and math is the solution to the active shooter problem if we want to minimize the victim count. I like to brag on myself a little bit and tell audiences I did at West Point. I graduated in the top 5% of the bottom third of my graduating class. And if you know, I started on the dean's other list. That's a pretty good accomplishment. And I immediately, 10 days after I retired from the Army, after 24 years, I taught high school for 4 years. So that really helps me when I go into schools. They can't say, you don't know what it's like, you don't understand what it is. Yeah, I do. So that's my past. What that means is these are the experiences and the perspectives from which I have studied this problem of the active shooter over the last 17 years and continue to do so. I was in the Army just a little over 24 years. The last 20 of that, I was an armor officer. So I was in units, commanding units in tanks and cavalry. So I think the next slide I'm going to show you what we need to do with this active shooter thing is bring the very simple process that the Army brings to prepare for a future fight. If the Army thinks we're going to have to fight somebody, we may have to fight somebody, or we know we're going to have to fight somebody. It's a 3-step process. Step 1 is we study and understand the coming fight. The fight has 2 components. Who are we going to fight? Our enemy, the threat. We got to study them and understand them. Why are they doing what they're doing? What weapon systems will they bring against us? What's their skill level on those weapon systems? What are their weaknesses that we can exploit if we know them? What are their strengths that we've got to guard against? What are their most likely courses of action? How are they most likely to react when we encounter them in the fight? That's how we understand a future enemy. The other half of that fight is what's the environment in which we will find this enemy and have to fight him, because that makes a lot of difference. Once we think we understand the coming fight, step 2 is, given what we understand about the coming fight, what is the best fighting plan we can create to defeat this enemy that we just studied and we now understand? I don't want a fighting plan. I want the best fighting plan. How do you measure that? Pretty simple. 2 measuring sticks. I want the fighting plan that ends the fighting in the least amount of time with the fewest amount of friendly casualties. That's pretty simple. Show me 8 options of fighting plans. I'm going to choose the one that ends the fighting the quickest with the fewest amount of us getting shot. Once we think we have the best fighting plan, step 3 is the training plan. How do we train our people to execute the best fighting plan to defeat the enemy that we now understand? It's not a complicated system, is it? But we're not doing it. I think as a country, we've been horribly failing at this active shooter thing for over 40 years. Now, if the first active shooter ever in America happened this morning, you could understand not being ready. This came out of left field. Who'd have thunk this, right? But we know who they are. We know pretty much exactly what they're going to do. They're very easy to prepare for, and we just refuse to do it. Why would I say that? Well, there's 33 years of schools. Now, Stockton wasn't the first one. Uvalde wasn't the last one. And there were several other school shootings within there, but that's just a sample of 33 years of failure. It doesn't look, if you grade an attack by the victim count, it doesn't look like we're adapting, learning, getting better, making adjustments. There's businesses. Not listed up here is a grocery store 53 miles from my house in Fordyce, Arkansas that was attacked within the last 12 months. And there's military bases. We're not learning, we're not doing better. Overall, there are 2 areas where I have seen not perfection, but good progress, forward movement, improvement, and one is churches. In my experience, after the Sutherland Springs, Texas church shooting where he shot 46 of the 50 people in that tiny church, that's where I saw many, if not most churches in America say, we're not doing this anymore. We're not going to let him come slaughter us. And believe it or not, law enforcement is moving in the right direction. Now we screw it up quite a bit still, but law enforcement gets it right more than it gets it wrong now, which is a huge improvement. The problem with law enforcement is, even if when they show up, they do absolutely perfectly, you're probably still going to have a high number because they show up too late. just looking at schools, I know this is a church focus, but just to look at how we just absolutely refuse to learn, there's those schools I put up there. In 1989, a guy went to an elementary school playground while they were at recess in Stockton, California, and shot 35 people, mostly kids, some staff, in 3 minutes, before he, luckily, as so many of them do, just decided that's enough and shot himself in the head. He self-terminated before the cops got there, but he shot 35 people before he did it. What was that school's plan if an active shooter showed up? If an active shooter shows up, their plan was, we will call 911 and wait on the professionals to show up to stop this thing. And that failed on the day of the attack, if you count 35 victims as failure, which I do. 10 years later, Columbine, which is Littleton, Colorado. What was their plan? Well, have a cop somewhere on the huge campus, but also call 911 and either let the SRO or the responding cops stop the active shooter. That failed on the day of the attack. Newtown, Connecticut, Sandy Hook, little elementary school in Connecticut. What was their plan? Well, it was to call 911 and wait on the professionals to come stop it. But we already knew that would likely, it works really well on every day there's not an attack. But we knew it would likely fail on the day of the attack. Why did the school leaders have a plan that we knew had a good chance of failing? And then Parkland, what was their plan? Have a cop somewhere on this big campus, but also call 911 and let the cops handle it. But we already knew that would likely fail. Why did the leaders of the Parkland School District have a plan with a historical failure? 3.5 months after Parkland, we had Santa Fe in Texas, another high school. What was their plan? Well, if one cop on the campus isn't enough, they had 2 cops on campus. They had 2 SROs on the high school. And their plan was to call 911 and let either the 2 SROs or the responding cops stop the attack. And if that plan failed. And then Uvalde was just a couple of years ago. What was their plan? Call 911 and wait. We knew, the leaders of that school knew 33 years earlier that that plan that they had would likely fail. And they had it. Henry Ford said, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And that's what we're getting. We just refuse to learn. A greater philosopher, Mark Twain, said, there is nothing to be learned from the second kick of a mule, or the 9th kick, or the 28th kick, or the 44th kick. And I would argue 98% of schools in America are just sitting right behind the mule, just hoping, instead of moving out of the way, they're just sitting back there hoping it doesn't kick. So understanding understanding the enemy that we may have to fight. Well, the only way I know to predict what's most likely to happen in the future by what's most often happened in the past. And in America, this is it. The shooter is usually a male, usually young. They will usually try to start their attack and carry out their attack in a place where they think no one will fight back. Because the vast majority of these shooters aren't shooting people to shoot people. They're shooting people as a means to get media coverage. They want the media coverage to get fame. If I go into Des Moines tonight and shoot one person, I'll make the Des Moines news. No one in Billings, Montana will know who I am. But if I go into Des Moines tonight and shoot 30 people, tomorrow morning, everybody in the world with an internet connection will know me. Know my face, know a manifesto that I've left, know every social media post I've ever made. It's instantaneous famous. So they can't just shoot 1 or 2 people to get this fame. They have to shoot a lot. So they don't go up inside of police stations to start these attacks. They don't go to NRA conventions or gun shows or hunting clubs. There's nothing preventing them from attacking those places. It just won't last long enough to get the body count. So they have to go somewhere where at least they don't think anybody will fight back initially. Of course, the cops will eventually show up, but by that time, that's more than enough time to get the body count that they need. They usually have multiple weapons. 2 to 4 guns on them is usually the norm when they start, and one of them is usually a long gun, a rifle or a shotgun, and that's what they'll start with. They'll start their attack with a rifle or shotgun. As soon as it's empty or malfunctions, they'll dump it, go to the second gun if they have it, shoot that one until it's empty or malfunction, dump it, go to the third one if they have it. They usually have large amounts of ammunition. Most of them have hundreds of rounds when they start their attack, and at least 5 have had over 1,000 rounds on them when they start their attack. And we'll talk about at least one of those tonight. So it's clear what their intent is. These attacks last a relatively short time, but time is relative. If you go to McDonald's drive-thru and order you some Frenchy fries, and it takes you 3 minutes to get up there and pay for them and get them, that 3 minutes goes by fast. You're listening to your jams, playing on your phone, swatting your kids. That time flies by. But if someone walks in this door and shoots at us in here for 3 minutes, that will seem like an eternity. It's the same amount of time, but it's relative. Active shooters almost never have an escape plan, which makes them very different from most other violent criminals that we plan for. They don't have an escape plan. They know when they shoot their first round of their attack, they will end that day in the morgue or in custody for the rest of their life. And they're happy about it. That is their plan. If you could convince me before the sun goes down today, I will be dead or in a prison for the rest of my life, I wouldn't be happy about that. But they are. This is their plan. So you can't really do anything to deter them. The only way you can't deter them with punishment. The only way you can deter them is they think, if I started here, it ain't going to last long enough, so I'm going to go somewhere else. The good news is we know what stops them. Their shooting of innocent people will stop once somebody gets close enough to confront them with deadly violence. Once that happens, they will stop shooting the innocent victims. And they will not go back and return to shoot innocent victims unless whoever confronted them and made them stop initially breaks contact. And then sometimes they will go back to shooting. Columbine and Uvalde would be two examples of that. The bottom is the most important, the math. They are going to shoot a new person every few seconds until the attack's over with. So if that's what we think's coming, how can we best plan? Several things get in the way of our plan. We get distracted. One is emotion. It's a natural human thing. We hear 30 innocent people were shot. Even if we don't know them, we get emotional about that. If they're kids at an elementary school, quadruple that amount of emotion. Nothing wrong with feeling emotion. There is something wrong with using that emotion to build a plan. We don't want an emotional plan. We want a logical plan. Now, people have political agendas. Nothing wrong with that. But we don't want to use our political agendas to make our plan, to either put something into our plan because of our political agendas or prevent something from getting in the plan because of the political agenda. And here I am in a church talking about hope. What a beautiful human thing hope is. There is nothing wrong with hope. There is nothing wrong with hoping there's never another active shooter attack. But there is something wrong with basing your plan on hope. You better be planning like he's coming tomorrow. Hope there never is one. Plan like he's coming tomorrow. So you got to get beyond hope in your plan. We do this for everything else. When I leave my house, I hope nobody burglarizes it. You think I locked my door? When I drove here from the airport, I hoped a drunk driver did not swerve over and hit me, but I still put on my seatbelt. We do that for everything else. We hope, but then we know hope doesn't always work, so we take precautions. The plan is if hope fails. We just have to do that for the active shooter. And this leaves us with the only thing that matters, which is time and math, which scares me initially because I'm a history major, but this is Jethro Bodine math. This is easy, gazentas and carrier knot stuff. This is pretty easy math right here. Math is not political, it's not religious, and it's not emotional, so it's one of the very few things you can get everybody to agree on. You may not believe me, but I'm telling you, I've gotten Baptist and Southern Baptist to agree that 2 + 2 is 4. Okay? It's very powerful because everybody agrees on math. Math is determine how many people were shot in past attacks, and it will determine how many people are shot in future attacks, as I'll show you. So if we want to have an effect, and God I do, a lowering effect over the number of victims shot in these attacks, math is all we have to look at. And here is that ugly math. This is the average shoot rate of an average active shooter. In the first minute after he fires his first round, that first 60 seconds, you can expect the average shooter to shoot a new person, a new victim, every 3 to 5 seconds. They don't go in the middle of the desert or the middle of the forest to do these shootings. They intentionally come to a crowded public place where it's very easy, even for an untrained, low-skilled person, to go from their first victim to their second victim to their third victim to their fourth victim pretty quickly. Then the shoot rate will usually slow down because people will take evasive measures eventually, start running, throwing things, hiding, etc. So in the second minute, you can expect a new victim shot every 6 to 8 seconds. In the third minute, every 10 to 12 seconds, a new victim is shot. Now this is average. If they're a real aggressive shooter like Dayton, Ohio, or Tucson, Arizona, it's going to be worse than this. If they're slow and lackadaisical like Columbine or Covenant, it won't be as bad. And their shoot rate will continue to slow down unless they come across a new pocket of unshot people. such as the Parkland High School shooter when he got to, after shooting nobody on the second floor, when he got to the third floor, hundreds of people packed in the hall like sardines. Easy pickings, so shoot rate went right back up again. What I showed you is the rate at which a shooter shoots a new victim. The rate at which bullets are hitting human flesh is much higher than this, because active shooters shoot their victims multiple times. So bullets are hitting flesh a lot more rapidly. They usually shoot their victims multiple times when they first shoot them, and then later in the attack, if they can't find anybody new, they'll just walk back through the crime scene and reshoot people on the ground that they previously shot. I met a survivor of the Sutherland Springs church shooting that was shot 11 times and lived. A survivor of the Pulse nightclub shooting was shot 3 separate times as the shooter walked back and forth through that club. A victim that did not survive, the San Ysidro McDonald's, was shot 14 times. Every child at Sandy Hook that was shot died because they were all shot multiple times. This is the most powerful tool I can give any leader of a church, business, school, any leader who's serious about this. Not just, they're not making a plan to pass some state inspection, but they are serious about saving lives. This is the first shot of the attack. This is the clock ticking, the first minute of the attack, the second minute of the attack, the third minute of the attack. Given how long we let him shoot, with an average shooter, that's the amount of victims we can expect at that point in the timeline. So again, very simple math. The longer we let him shoot, the more victims you'll have. Or if you're a more cup half full type person, the quicker we stop him, the fewer victims we'll have. And that's the end of the spectrum I like to talk about. Again, the problem with cops, even if they do perfect when they show up, all they're doing is trying to keep it to 20 and not let it get to 25, or keep it to 25 and not let it get to 30. Cops very rarely can be the cause of a low victim count because you just get there too late. So I asked these next few questions of all audiences. I know it's not fun to think about, but neither is this topic. Someone enters this room with a gun and starts shooting at all of us. Once he starts shooting at all of us, how soon would you like that shooting to stop? I get some funny looks when I ask this. And some people like that. Some people say that's actually a silly question. But I would counter with, no, that's really the only serious adult question that we have to ask and answer if we're going to seriously plan. And like math, I can get everybody to agree. Gay, straight, male, female, Republican, Democrat, Mets fan, Yankees fan, old, young, everybody says right now. Some people say right cuss word now, but everybody says right now. So it's amazingly easy to get everybody to agree on what we want to happen in response to an active shooter. The friction and excuse making starts when we say, okay, let's build a plan that gets us what we all say we want. That's when the brakes get put on. We have to make a huge leap from wanting the attack to end quickly with a low victim count to planning for it to end quickly with a low victim count. The words are very similar, but it's 180 degrees out between hoping for it and planning to make it happen. Took me too long after I retired out of the military, August 107, to realize this was not a normal day-to-day question like it was in the military. What's the maximum acceptable number of shot people to have while we wait? That is my question. What I'm not asking is how many shot people do you want, how many do you hope for, or how many do you pray for? Those are separate questions with separate answers. I'm specifically asking what is the maximum acceptable number of shot people to have while we wait, and what are most places waiting on? They're waiting on someone to realize what's going on, that they're in the midst of an active shooter attack and feel safe enough to call 911. The average delay between the first shot fired and the first 911 call heard by a 911 operator of that jurisdiction is 1 to 4 minutes. There's a 1 to 4 minute delay before that first call is heard. The fastest one I have data on is Fairchild Air Force Base, 46 seconds. I think I'm going to play that one for you. So now someone's finally made that call. The operator has to tell them to quit screaming, repeat what you said, understand it enough to the point that they can push a radio button and tell every cop on dispatch frequency, we have just had an informational report of a shooting at XYZ church. Cops just heard about it. Now the cops got to travel there. That's driving if they're patrol cop, or running, walking if they're already somewhere on the property. These shootings, not always, but usually either start in a building or they transition inside a building after they started outside. Not all, but most. So once the cop gets to the correct building, the cop has to enter that building. That might be immediately upon getting there, or it may not. Once the cop gets in the correct building, the cop has to continue aggressing towards the evidence until they find the active shooter, get close enough to threaten him with deadly violence, and stop the attack. So it's the maximum number of shot people to have while we wait on that process to take place. In many audiences I talk to, if I listen, I will hear one or more people whisper, 0. Or they'll proudly hold up their hand. 0 is the only acceptable number. Those are the people you don't want planning for this, because they're stuck on hope. I hope for 0. I pray for 0. I want 0, but I'm not going to plan for 0. If my plan is 0, when he shoots his first victim, my plan's failed. And the only plan left in this room is his, and we're not going to like his. So I have to have a plan that goes beyond my hope, that goes beyond 0. And that's what most people are not doing. Leaders have to get beyond hope, and they have to get beyond 0. We have to treat an active shooter attack like combat, because that's exactly what it is. And I get resistance here, mostly from schools. Ed, dude, this ain't combat, okay? This is a school. I disagree. It used to be a school. Before that first shot, the janitor was sweeping, cafeteria people were cooking, coaches were blowing whistles, principal was principaling. Everybody was doing school stuff until that first shot. Now, none of those people are doing any of those tasks anymore. Everybody's job after the first shot is to stop the killing of us. That sounds like combat. In combat, we don't hope or wish casualties away. We don't say we're going to attack a dug-in enemy tomorrow. Let's just hope none of us get hurt. That would not be adult. We know we're going to have casualties, so once you admit that, it frees you to plan for casualties and actually plan to minimize them instead of just hoping we don't have many. You're not taking control. If you plan for them, you can take control. The problem with active shooter combat is it starts as one-way combat, where only one of the two sides in the fight is doing any fighting. And one-way combat's nifty if you're on the giving side, but it's no fun if you're on the receiving side. And all of us good people start on the receiving side. Because remember, this is his plan. His plan is to show up at a place he thinks he's the only one that's going to hurt people for a few minutes. So the question is very simple, but it's extremely uncomfortable for most leaders. How long are we going to let it stay his plan? We know what he's going to come here to do. We know that ahead of time. That's no secret. So once he shows up and starts doing his plan, how long are we going to let it stay that way? If we let it stay his plan, where he's the only one hurting people, we're not going to like the number. But if we quickly, and that's the most important word there, if we quickly turn it into two-way combat, we have a high expectation of a low victim count. Schools, churches, and businesses fail because they rely on the church, on our country's default plan. It's there for us, so we rely on it. I travel 3 or 4 times a month now. I stay in a lot of hotels. Sometimes I'll check in and they'll say, Mr. Monk, as a guest, we have a free breakfast tomorrow for you. Thank you very much. Go down there, there's 2 stale pastries with flies buzzing around. I understand this is here for me to use, but I'm not going to use it. I'm going to Waffle House. I'm going to go get something better. This is what our country offers us, and it fails. So we got to not use this and opt for something better. The shooter walks in with, or while in here, he pulls out his gun and he shoots his first victim. Bang. Victim count is now at 1. As the clock moves forward, that's only going to go up. There's a 1 to 4 minute delay between the first shot of an attack and that first 911 call heard by an operator. In this example, I made it 1.5 minutes. That's pretty quick. So this is one of the most crucial things for leaders to understand. If their plan to stop the shooter requires a 911 call, they are almost guaranteed mathematically a double-digit victim count, because there will be 10 or more people shot by the time the first operator hears the first 911 call. Let's give that operator a few seconds to tell the person to stop screaming and understand what's going on. Now push a radio button and tell every cop on dispatch we have a report of an active shooter. The cops just heard about the shooting and we're already past 20. It's not the cops' fault. The cops just heard about it. Cops have no magical ability to unshoot people that were shot before they got the radio call. And cops really can't help the next several that are going to get shot as they travel to where the radio told them the shooting was. Again, that's driving, patrol, running, walking if they're already on like a school resource officer at a school, or some big churches pay cops off duty to be somewhere on the campus. Now, if this church, school, business, if this attack is inside of a city serviced by a municipal police department, it is possible to get the famous 3-minute response time, 3 minutes drive time. But if this church is out in the county and they're waiting on a trooper or a deputy, this could be a very long wait. But In this example, I made it the better of the two. 3 minutes after the radio dispatch, the first cop screams into the parking lot and slams on his brakes. Before the cop gets in the building, we're already at 30 with the average shooter. This cop does what we want a cop to do. Gets out of the vehicle, finds an entrance, gets in the building, aggresses, finds the active shooter, and threatens him with deadly violence. We've stopped the attack. Just entirely too late. What does stop it? We know what stops it. Somebody getting close enough to threaten him with deadly violence. That does work. It just worked too late here. So we take what works and we drag it back down the timeline. Given the average shoot rate of the average active shooter, we have to stop him no later than 30 seconds into his attack to have a realistic mathematical good chance, not a guarantee, good chance of a single-digit victim count, if that's what we want. We got to stop him within the first 30 seconds because there is no way possible to communicate with somebody who's not here and then get them here within 30 seconds. That leaves us with, we got to stop him. The intended victims have to stop him, the people there. We've only had 5 multiple shooter attacks in our country so far. So well over 90% of active shooters have been a sole shooter. But even if there is only one shooter, there's 2 enemies that we have to plan for. And that second enemy is why we're failing. We're not planning for his accomplice, his buddy, his partner, and that's the clock. Once he starts shooting, that clock's going to start ticking, and there's going to be a new person shot every few ticks. So it's not enough to have a plan that stops the active shooter. We have to have a plan that stops him quickly. Imagine calling 911 and screaming that your house is on fire. And the operator saying, well, you want it out? Yes. Well, just let it burn. It'll go out, won't it? If you just let it burn, just let it go. It'll burn. It'll eventually go out. No, I want it out quickly. In this state, I came up and helped schools, and the chief of police said, we shouldn't have armed staff in schools because this area has a tri-county SWAT team that's extremely well trained and equipped to handle an active shooter. And I'm sure they are, but the chief never talked about the clock. Hey, chief, how long is it going to take to notify the members of this multi-county SWAT team? Much less get them together and assemble them, much less gear them up, much less get them to the right campus, the right building on campus. How long is that all going to take? Never talked about that. He just said they're better equipped. Well, SEAL Team 6 is better than your SWAT team, but I'm not waiting on them either. John Wick's better than SEAL Team 6, but I'm not waiting on him either. If you're not there when it starts, you're irrelevant to a low victim count. How can we stop the active shooter? I know of 3 ways. Shooting him down has an unbelievably high success rate. Or by threatening him with deadly violence, he chooses to shoot himself. That has an extremely high success rate. I can't name one active shooter that has shot himself in the head and then continued to shoot innocent people. Or if we do not have a gun among us, we fight him unarmed. That is not my preferred method. But if we don't have a gun among us and he attacks, we have 2 options. They're both bad. Fight him unarmed or watch him shoot 30 or 40 of us. I don't like either one of those, but I know which one's less bad. So we got to fight him unarmed. And that can work. And it has worked because, thank God, so far, these are not John Wick and Jason Bourne coming to do these shootings. They're usually just a punk with dad's gun that barely knows how to run it. No matter what method we use to stop the shooter and the clock, once we do that, 3 beautiful things happen. From that point, he will not shoot a new person, which means the victim count will no longer go up. He will not put additional bullet holes in people he previously shot. Fewer bullet holes means a better chance of survival. And now we can get the magic of emergency medicine in to treat and evacuate those few that we let him shoot before we stopped him. And we don't let him bleed out on the floor for 3 hours like we did at Pulse, or an hour and a half like we did at Uvalde. So let's get into it. Churches, remember, study the enemy, and one of the things you do is you try to identify weaknesses that you can exploit. Well, I consider stupidity a weakness. About half or a little over half of church active shooters so far have started shooting in the parking lot. That is stupid. So for about the half that do that, let's take advantage of that. We got to have people in the parking lot, not just cameras. We got to have people. It's stupid to start shooting in the parking lot because you really can't get a high shoot rate out there and you're very easily engaged out there. So for the half of the stupid ones that start out there, if we can stop him out there, our chances of a low victim count are huge. Now for the half that we let get in the building, we still have to stop them. It's just more complex and more dangerous. We still got to do it. It's just, so why not stop them out there where it's a lot easier? So far, the active shooter's not been a member of the church or a regular attender. Meaning a member or somebody, he's not a member, but I've seen him off and on for the last 6 months or so, right? A handful of the active shooters at churches had been to the church previously. A couple of them had been there previously asking for handouts, clothing, food, etc. And then sometime later came back to the church to shoot it up. I know at least 2. Others might have come to 1, 2, or 3 services. All they're doing is reconning, but they haven't been coming for months and months. Having armed church members present at the church as a welcoming party for the active shooter has worked 100% of the time. Now that's only twice, but it's 2 of twice. It's worked every time it's been challenged. That's important to me. So when I talk to schools, I tell them I got it. 8:30 to 3:30 is your Super Bowl, but there's a lot of pregame and postgame. I got it. Sabbath worship service is a church's Super Bowl, but there's a lot of pregame and postgame. I've worked with churches that are 7-day-a-week, 18-hour-a-day operations. So yeah, I got it. You got to worry about your Sabbath service, but you got what? Weddings and Bible school and vacation Bible school and revivals and all this other stuff. Daycare sometimes. So I start with a couple that weren't the Sunday service. This was a Wednesday night youth music prayer rally. Why in the world would you need to have security there? Because evil gets to decide where evil shows up. And he showed up here. Luckily, shortly after starting, according to the witnesses, facial expressions, it just seemed like he lost the stomach for it. Like, wow, shooting people I didn't know is not as cool as I had thought it might be. Went back to the back pew, sat down, and clocked himself out, way before the cops got there. This one made a lot of news. You may remember this one. South Carolina, another Wednesday night, Bible study in the basement. He goes in before Bible study starts, sits and attends the entire Bible study, and then when they stand for the parting prayer, pulls out a pistol and shoots everybody in there, kills everybody he shoots because he shoots everybody like a lot, many times. Runs away, gets caught the next day. This is about that shooting.
Dan Simmons stumbled toward the exit, and Roof shot him several more times, and he fell right next to the door to get out of the church. His son later testified about wondering why his father did not pull the gun that he normally had on him. It turned out that Reverend Simmons had left his gun in his car. And so there is some speculation that he was trying to get to his car to get to his gun.
This happened before Sutherland Springs. I ran into a lot of this working with churches before the Sutherland Springs attack. Forgiveness, turn the other cheek, thou shalt not kill. We're struggling, we're getting pulled from both sides. After the Sutherland Springs attack, most churches stopped that. This was another one. He shot his first person where? In the parking lot, came in the back door of the church, started shooting people. An unarmed usher, and you can't tell by the shooter's photo, but he's like a bodybuilder, like super ginormous cut dude. And had a gun. Unarmed usher ran at him. Unarmed. Fought him. Got beat pretty severely. But in the beating he took, the shooter's gun went off and shot the shooter. So then the beat up usher ran out to the truck and got the pistol he should have and could have legally been carrying in that church and brought it back in and held him until cops showed up. First Baptist Church, Sutherland Springs, Texas. It's a little bitty white wooden church with a little bitty paved road right in front of it. The hero here is Stephen Williford. He doesn't go to this church. Stephen Williford's a very devout man. If you want to read his book, it's titled A Town Called Sutherland Springs. He published it in 2023. He is trying to catch a nap. He goes to another church, but he's at home trying to catch a nap because in a couple hours, he goes on call at a major hospital in San Antonio. So he knows once he goes on call, he's not getting any sleep for 12 hours. So he's trying to catch a nap. The shooter shows up, leaves his vehicle running in the street, gets out and shoots 3 magazines of AR-15 ammo into that white building from where? The parking lot. Now, I don't know how long that took, but that takes some time. While he was doing that, Stephen's daughter was on the side of their house closest to the church. They're 3 houses down. And she heard the popping sound. She looked out the window and thought she saw a guy shooting into the church. So she went across the home, woke up her father out of the nap. Said, Daddy, there's a guy down there shooting up the Baptist church. So Stephen got up, put on pants, did not put on shoes, opened up his safe, got out his AR rifle, an empty magazine, what he described as a handful of ammo, turns out to be 8 rounds, And he's running out of his house barefooted, thumbing rounds into a magazine with his AR under his arm. While he was getting up, putting on pants and opening up a safe, his daughter ran out and ran down there and saw the shooter walk up into the church after he'd shot the 3 magazines. And so as Stephen's coming out, she came back to the house and said, "Daddy, I saw him. He ran up, he walked up into the church. He's wearing black tactical gear." So Stephen's running across his neighbor's yard, still thumbing those last rounds in the mag. And when he gets to the neighbor's house right next to the church, the shooter comes out. He shot 46 of the 50 people in there. Stephen and him got into a firefight. The neighbor's car, Stephen was behind. And I'm not a car guy, but when Stephen tells his story, he always says, "Up to this point in my life, I never had use of a Dodge." But his neighbor's Dodge protected him, caught a lot of rounds, and actually the neighbor's house behind him got hit several times. But he did not. He shot the shooter 6 out of 6 times if you count a graze of the helmet a hit. But he was wearing level 3 body armor, so a lot of them got stopped by the plates, but he got one in the hip and one between the plates and the ribs, and that's the good one. And so the shooter jumps in his truck and screams away, or jumps in his SUV and takes off. So Stephen's sitting there with a hot AR, barefooted, and he looks over and he sees this guy, Johnny Langendorf, a welder. He does not know Johnny, he's never met him, but Johnny's driving down the road in front of this church trying to go see his girlfriend this morning. And Johnny sees 2 guys he does not know shooting at each other in front of a church, which is not something you normally see. And so he flips off his phone and is calling 911. "Hey man, there's 2 people shooting out. You might want to send some deputies. There's 2 people out here shooting each other in front of this church." When the shooter drives off, a fuzzy, tubby, white bearded guy, barefooted with an AR, goes running over to Johnny's truck with a rifle. And Stephen says, "Anywhere else in America, a reasonable man would have driven away from me, but this is Texas." So Johnny rolls his window down as Stephen's running up to the truck, and he says, "That guy just shot up the church. We have to go after him." And he said immediately he heard the electronic locks unlock. And he waddled around and got in the passenger side, and they took off. We know en route, the shooter called his father and said, "Dad, I've been shot. I've done something very horrible. I'm going to die. I love you, blah, blah. About 7 miles away, he pulls off the road, drives out into a grass field about 30 yards, and parks. And we now know he clocked himself out with a handgun. But they didn't know that. They just knew he pulled out in the field. So they pull over on the side of the road. Stephen's already done a mag check. He's got 1 round in the mag. So he knows he's got 2 rounds left. And he says, "I'm about 90% sure at this point the guy's got body armor. So I got 2 rounds to finish this with a guy who's probably got body armor." And he gets out barefooted, lays the rifle across Johnny's hood. And he's sitting there and he says, "My mind's going 1,000 miles an hour. What ifing? What if he gets out of the car? What if he backs up at us? What if he keeps driving through the field? What if he does a big U-turn? He's wargaming this." And he's there 4 to 5 minutes. And then the first deputy finally pulls up behind him about 20 yards. And over the PA system of the car, the deputy says, "Throw your weapon on the ground and put your hands in the air." Stephen lays his rifle on the hood and puts his hands up. And the deputy says, "Not you." And he gets his rifle and he goes back up. Okay. 3rd, 4th, or 5th deputy that showed up just happened to have a drone. And they flew the drone up, looked in the window, and that's how they knew it was over. That's inside that church. I've been to the church. I have not been inside the church, but the way the holes are bigger, that probably tells you most of those are the ones he shot from outside that splintered when they came in. The guy I told you that shot 11 times and lived, he was shot 3 times through the wall before he entered. Then he was shot 8 more times inside the church. That's from Stephen's book. I've seen video of him testifying in different government things that he has nightmares that he could not get there faster. He knew a lot of his family went to that church. He knew everybody that went to the church. So every time he heard a gunshot, he pictured a bullet ripping through not just a human, but a human that he knew.
People at that church, they're friends of mine, their family. And every time I heard a shot, I knew that probably represented a life. I was scared to death. I was scared for me, and I was scared for every one of them. And I was scared for my own family that just lived less than a block away. I'm no hero. I am not. I think my God, my Lord, protected me and gave me the skills to do what needed to be done. And I just wish I could have gotten there faster, but I didn't know. I didn't know what was happening.
Encourage you to read his book. If you ever get a chance to hear him talk, listen to him talk. He's an amazing man. He takes a very biblical view of the whole event. So I showed you all of those. I'm going to show you Christ Church in a minute. What did every single victim in all of those attacks have in common? They were all unarmed. There might be a clue there. There might be a lesson there. New Life Church. So we go from a little bitty wooden church with 50 people to a mega church with 6,000 seats. The hero here is Gina Som. Her book is called God, the Gunman, and Me. It's out of print, so if you go looking for it, you're going to pay a lot for it. But I've heard through somebody who knows her that she's considering republishing, and I hope she does. He shows up at this church with an AR and 2 pistols and 1,400 rounds of ammo, much of it in preloaded magazines and a backpack. Now, that's not what he has in his car. That's what he has on him. This church pays 4 off-duty cops to be there in uniform in their marked patrol car. They have 2 services, 6,000 seats each. The shooter shows up a little over halfway through the first service. The theory is he saw 4 marked police cars and he did math and he said, nothing prevents me from starting it here, but 4 cops, the chances are they would probably stop this before I get what I want. And I'm going to show you what he wanted. So he sits in the car for over an hour and a half. He sits in the car with the engine running because it's cold until the first service ends, through the break, all the way through the second service. Until the second service ends, the contract with the cops is they have to stay 30 minutes after the end of the second service for traffic and parking and that kind of stuff. When the 4th police car drove away, he got out. The church has been over for 30 minutes, but this is a mega church. There's still hundreds and hundreds of people in this building and in the parking lot. He gets out, and where do you suppose he starts shooting people? Parking lot. Shot 4 in the parking lot, including a man and his twin daughters, killed both his daughters, and then walked into the main corridor entrance, and through the glass double doors, he was outside, but shot his 5th person inside. Then he walked in, and then he met Jean. They had 8 security team members at this church during the first service, but 4 of them begged and sniveled and whined to leave after the first service because there was a Broncos home game that was going to kick off. So they agreed 4 would stay. 2 of those 4 were armed. Gene and the leader of the team that day, a guy named Carl Chin, who is now the president of the Faith-Based Security Network, a nationwide organization to help churches share security stuff, good stuff. And then he walked in there and he met Gene.
I hear this muffled pop, pop, pop noise coming from the east hallway, which was on my left, and the east hallway is over 100 yards long and 30 feet wide approximately, and it is the busiest hallway in the church. So I immediately go over there, and as I'm making my way to the beginning of the east hallway, these loud thundering cracks of a high-powered rifle just start ringing out, and I hear everybody screaming, and someone's like, "Get down, he's got a gun." And I thought that the gunman was inside our church. A taller security guy behind me says, "There he is, Gene. He's coming in the doors right now." Well, the gunman's entering the complete opposite end of the hallway where I stood. So he had been shooting through the doors of the church. So he was shooting into the masses of people. And so I pulled my gun out of the waist of my jeans where I keep it, and I just sprinted down the hallway toward him. And all of a sudden, everyone's gone. There was no one left in the hallway except for me and the gunman. And he's pulling open the second and last set of these heavy glass doors. So I took cover in this hallway on the right that was perpendicular to the east hallway that he was walking down. I put my gun in the high ready, and I was just going to wait for him to come up to me, and I was going to shoot him, perpendicular, and then I'd shoot him. And he turns toward me, and I shot rapidly 5 times and knocked him back completely on his back. And he sits up, and I walk toward him, and I said, "Drop your weapon or I will kill you." And he's shooting at me now, so we're shooting at each other. Obviously, I'm going to keep shooting if he's shooting at me. And then he tried to duck behind this hallway. And I couldn't lose sight of him because then I'd have another situation. So shot him again for a total of 10 times.
The active shooter ended it with the 11th one in his own mouth from his own pistol. That's what he had put on a website, an anonymous website, before he went and did his shooting. His parents he had zero negative indicators up to this point in his life. He was in his young 20s, still lived with his parents. He'd had no negative stuff in his life, no drug use, no police contact, good student. Just brain went haywire. West Freeway Church, this is in the Fort Worth area. Jack Wilson here is the hero. He's been the leader of this church's security team for many, many years. He personally trains their armed people on their security team. He has a small training facility. He said on this day he thinks there were 18, including himself, armed people in this church, and right around 250 people attending the church. The shooter is this guy here. He came in, actually Jack's son-in-law shook his hand when he came in. Jack's son-in-law was being a greeter at the church that morning. Shook the active shooter, didn't know at the time. The active shooter had a pistol grip 12-gauge shotgun with the barrel down the front pocket of his pants, and he was just holding it underneath his coat. He resits himself a couple of times. He ends up in the far right back corner. So if this is the pulpit, he is in the far right back corner, sitting here. That's Tony the usher. He's got a communion plate because they just finished communion. This is Richard, a member of the security team. This is Jack Wilson. Shooter's going to get up, get in the usher's face, talking to him. I don't know what he said. And then he's going to back up and pull that shotgun out from under his coat. Richard's going to stand up, tell him drop the gun, drop the gun. He's going to put the gun over on Richard, shoot him through the chest with a slug, pump the action, go back to Tony the usher, shoot him through the chest with buckshot, pump the action, and start walking towards the pulpit. And Jack's going to draw his pistol, and at 14 yards, he's going to shoot him through the head. If you don't want to see 3 people die, 2 of them murdered, now would be a good time to play on your phone.
Church services are about to begin here. This guy that just popped up has been a little bit of problem for the ushers already. We have audio. Let's listen in, and then we'll start learning lessons.
Guns out. What's everybody in the church doing? The natural human reaction to gunshot and explosion is to get down. You don't have to train people to do that. That's what they're going to do. So people will try to tell you, you can't have armed people in a sanctuary. Too crowded. You'll never get a shot off. You can't have armed people in a school cafeteria. You'll never get a shot off. You can't have armed people in a movie theater or a crowded store. You'll never get a clean shot off. You can expect a 10 to 15 second window where almost everybody's going to get down like they did here. I don't know of an official scoring system for stopping an active shooter. You know, in the Olympics, they've got judges that grade synchronized diving and that kind of crap. But I'm going to go out on a limb. And I'm going to say if you stop the active shooter 5.5 seconds after his gun becomes visible to anybody, I'm going to call that a successful response. If you stop the active shooter 2.3 seconds after the active shooter's first shot, I'm going to call that a successful response. So after every big active shooter attack as a country, we wring our hands. And the media leads us in wringing our hands, going, oh, not another one. Oh, my goodness, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do about this? What can we possibly do? Didn't Jack just show us what to do? I mean, there's a little humor here, but Jack didn't say, hey, listen, I've got a theory I would like to explain to you that I think could work. He showed us what works. It's not like, I think there's a way we could split the atom. We've been splitting that thing for decades. We know how to do it. Gene showed us how to do it. We know what works. We've had people do it. We know exactly what works. The question is, do we have the stomach to do it? That is Jack, and Jack has promised me that that is not an iPhone. He's shaking hands with the governor of the second most populous state in our country after he gets an award. The governor's not concerned that Jack's carrying a pistol next to him. The governor's security staff is not concerned that Jack's carrying a pistol next to him. Jack's pistol's not the problem because Jack's not the problem. Lesson here. Every single time they've showed up and attacked a church with armed church members ready to be a welcoming party for them, they've paid the price, and we've had a low victim count. The boogeyman arguments is what I've named. I've been doing this 16 years, 15 years. I know going in, if I get people that don't want to do it, what they're going to say. So one of them is, you'll misidentify who the active shooter is and shoot the wrong person. Jack did not misidentify which guy had a pistol grip shotgun shooting his people. He got that right. Oh, but you'll shoot at the right person, but you'll shoot wildly and miss. He shot in a church full of 250 people. He didn't hurt anybody else. The cops will show up and shoot the Good Samaritan by mistake. Nope. Cops, Jack says, I cannot tell you how long after I shot this guy that somebody eventually made the first 911 call. But I can tell you that the first cop showed up 4.5 minutes after the first 911 call, because they had to knock on the outside door of the church to be let in because they locked their doors. So Jack's gun was long holstered. He was on his second cigarette by the time the cops showed up. And that's not a criticism of cops. That's a criticism of the system that brings the cops to us. How many of y'all have seen the body cams of the Lakewood Church in Houston? Mega church, 16,000 seats, I think. That's a pretty big church. They paid 5 off-duty cops to be there. 4 are in uniform. One's a county deputy. 3 are Houston police officers in their uniforms. And there's one guy in coat and tie because he's a state alcohol beverage control officer. The church paid 5 cops to be there for security when this active shooter shows up. It's the only active shooter at a church I know of in America that was a female. It's the only active shooter in America that I know of that brought their child with them on their attack. The 4 uniformed law enforcement officers hid. Coat and tie guy went down there and killed her. 4 out of 5 cops this church paid off duty to be there for security hid. It's not pretty. So this is a security video. This doesn't have any sound. I won't play the whole thing. Once the coat and tie cop goes down there, that gunfight between those two lasted over 2 minutes. That's her child. Can you see the kid holding his ears? Because his mom's shooting an AR-15 inside of a building, which I'm guessing is loud. Alcohol beverage control officer. Now, the fight's not pretty, it's not smooth, but by God, he went down there and found her and killed her, so I'm going to give him a high passing grade. Again, once he started shooting, the shooting between them lasted over 2 minutes before he shot her to the ground, kept telling her to stop moving, put the gun down, she wouldn't, so he finished her off on the ground. Yay, him. Passing grade, high passing grade. Bravery. I'm going to skip this one and just show you this one. This is because this has 2 together, 2 of the uniforms.
We are Lakewood Church.
Maybe it is Lakewood Church.
We need to go more. We need to get closer. Oh, there go. My camera's not working.
2 minutes of that, they hid. So did the deputy, so did the other Houston officer. So I showed you Sutherland Springs with Stephen Williford, New Life Church with Gina Somm, White Settlement with Jack Wilson, and the Lakewood Church, which you just saw. Look at these low numbers, and then wham, Stephen Williford's victim count is 46. He was just as brave, just as skilled as the other heroes. Why is his victim count so much higher than the others? He wasn't there. He had to get told about it, get his gear, and get down there. Once he got down there, he did God's work. But he was basically like a responding cop or deputy. It took him so long to get notified and get down there that All right. They claim to be a Presbyterian church. I got to believe they got some Baptist in their blood, because this didn't happen during the service. It happened during the potluck that immediately followed the service. The guy shows up with 2 pistols and starts shooting people. A brave doctor who's a member of the church ran at him. Unfortunately, got shot down before he got to him. Then during a reload, the pastor hit him over the back of the head and shoulders with a chair, knocked him to the ground, and that's an actual cell phone photo of them holding him until the cops came. Now, he shot 6 people, and 6 is bad, but how many would he have shot had they all just got up under the tables, hid, froze, begged for their life, waited on the cops to come save them? You got to fight back. What we fight back with is negotiable. The fact that we got to fight back is not negotiable, not if we want a low victim count. Tumwater, Washington, this is Pastor David George now, my friend. He pastors a small rural church outside of Olympia, Washington. He's also on volunteer fireman on their rural volunteer fire department, and he's a qualified EMT for the fire department. He preaches his Father's Day sermon, and then he goes to Walmart. He went to Walmart to return a bicycle he had bought for his granddaughter that had a defect in it. His family members went with him to Walmart to bankrupt him, as your family members will do. So it just so happened that that's where the active shooter kicked off. Not at church, but after church at a Walmart. He shoots inside a Walmart, and then he runs out. You'll see him run out, points the gun to his right. David's right there. David said he turned, and he said, I expected to absorb a bullet, but he didn't shoot. Then he goes outside. Then you'll see David come outside, and David hasn't drawn his gun yet. The other armed citizen has. David has not. He said, I didn't go out there to shoot this guy. I went out there to find my family. He had 4 family members with him. I just wanted to find my family and get away from this craziness. But then he sees him shoot his next victim in the parking lot. And he says, I don't know where my family is. They could be hiding behind right next to him, and they're going to be the next ones to get shot. So reluctantly, he drew his Glock 19 out that he was carrying after church in Walmart and shot the guy to death.
As Day runs out, pointing his gun at customers, 2 who have their own weapons follow him out. A camera captures Day trying to carjack other drivers, and he ends up shooting one, Ricky Feevey. And moments later, one of those armed customers.
Look how he came around the car. He was perfectly placed.
That's David after he shot the guy.
Firefighter and pastor David George shoots and kills Day.
Not a bad shot group by David. How many of y'all seen the video of the Christchurch Mosque in New Zealand? It's the worst one I have. I'm not going to play it here. I don't play it for almost everybody. I'm going to tell you what happened, though. He went in this mosque, and he shot for about 1.5 minutes. And then he walked back out to his car, swapped rifles, and came back in and shot for about another 2 minutes. That last 2 minutes, almost all he did was just reshoot into the piles of bodies. The 79 people he shot there, he pretty much, 90% of them he shot in the first 1.5 minutes, because they all just ran to the corners of the room, which just made it so easy. It's really, really bad. Can I hold you up for just about 5 more minutes before we go to lunch? Okay, this is not a church, but I love playing this because this clearly shows the problem of how the clock is linked to the number of victims. This is Fairchild Air Force Base. This is the hospital. This is called the annex, and there's a dental office and other doctor's offices around here. The shooter's going to show up, and he's going to shoot 2 people in the annex. Then he's going to walk across the parking lot and shoot 2 more people as he goes. He's going to go in the hospital and shoot a bunch of people. And then luckily for us, he's going to choose to come out of the building. Because once he comes out of the hospital, his shoot rate goes way down, and now he's easy to deal with. If he just stayed up in that 6-story complex multi-wing building, it could have took cops an hour to dig him out of there. Andy Brown is a military police officer on duty here on Fairchild Air Force Base, and he's on bike patrol. But it's not cool Harley bike patrol. It is 10-speed bike patrol. And he's 1/4 mile down here. So what this video is going to show, it's going to show red arrows that show where the active shooter is, his movements. That is time synchronized with every time you see an X, that's a new person, a new victim that he shot. That is all time synchronized with 911 calls coming into dispatch, dispatch sending radio calls out to cops, and a little bit of crosstalk by the cops. Here's what you're going to see. Follow along and time it if you want to. Right when the first 911 operator hears There is a guy in the hospital with a gun. It's at 46 seconds, and the 10th person is shot right at that moment. It only takes the operator 16 seconds to listen to that and then push out a radio call to all cops. By the time Andy and the other cops hear about it, 15 people have been shot. Andy Brown only takes a minute and a half to, after he gets the radio call, pedal a quarter of a mile, drop his bike, and shoot the guy at 70 yards and kill him. Fastest 911 call I know of, a very quick dispatch, and unbelievable, fast, aggressive, skilled police work, and we're still in the 20s. So here we go. He's in the building now.
He entered into the offices of the psychologist and psychiatrist and shot them in the chest before exiting and crossing the parking lot.
He's in the parking lot now. He came out of the building.
To law enforcement desk. To law enforcement desk. Crime stop, reporting a crime or emergency. Emergency crime. There's a guy in the hospital running around with a shotgun.
10.
Copy.
10 persons.
Essentially over. Okay. Child police, all forces patrols. We have an alarm at the ER hospital. Informational, we have an individual in the hospital running around with a shotgun. Copy, police 1.
Andy's pedaling that way.
Crime stop, you're reporting crime or emergency.
Emergency crime. I don't know. There's a guy bolting out of building 9010 right across the street from the hospital with a gun, firing.
Running out of building 9010?
Yes, right across the street from the hospital.
Okay, thank you. Child police, all responding patrols. The individual just ran out of building 9010 across from the hospital, firing off rounds out of his shotgun. Copy 1.
I want you to take the front. Copy.
Crime stop, reporting crime or emergency. Yes.
He's out of the building now.
Yeah, no report is 2 people got shot in dining hall in the hospital. Well, my housekeeper just going seconds. Okay. Shut the time home for 1 second. Okay. 2 people got shot in the hospital. I heard 2 gangs.
Andy's coming from this direction.
Oh, 6, are you hear me?
No, go ahead again.
4, go ahead and take the one on the dental clinic.
Andy drops his bike right there.
Search out police, search out security. You just received a notification from the hospital. You have individuals down. I repeat, you have individuals down.
And with his pistol shoots him at 70 yards and kills him. So that's the attack. Without warning, someone starts shooting people in a public place. He's going to shoot a new person every few seconds until someone counterattacks and stops him, or he just decides to stop, which happens quite a bit. But we never want to count on that second one because they usually don't decide to stop until they're deep in their attack and they have the number that they want. If you don't stop it, if somebody doesn't stop it within the first 30 seconds, your chances of a 10 or more double-digit victim count are almost mathematically guaranteed. If you let him get into the second minute, you're probably going to have 20-plus victims. If you let him shoot in the fourth minute, you're probably going to have 30-plus victims. So if you're crazy enough to come back after you grab a sandwich or whatever they got down there for you,